we ready to go? Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar, Mending Fences, Domestic Violence Treatment for Men. We're going to look at the prevalence of domestic violence among men, the risk factors, the treatment, and so forth. The Yad Sarah Family Center treats victims and also perpetrators of domestic violence. The center works to empower women, men, and children to cope with abuse and heal from the trauma and the pain of domestic abuse. So let me introduce you to our panelists today. We have Dr. Shlomit Lehman. She's a seasoned expert in social services. She heads up the Yad Sarah Family Center, which provides treatment and support to those suffering from domestic violence. Mani Pollak, who's there as well, and he's a clinical social worker at the Yad Sarah Family Center. He does individual, couple, and group therapy with extensive experience treating patients who have difficulty controlling anger, who are in domestic violent cycles and situations. On the other side of the pond, we have Shari Bloomberg, who's a doctoral student and adjunct professor at the NYU Silver School of Social Work. She has focused her career on aspects of trauma, and she specializes in domestic violence. Then there's me. I'm Dr. Pamela Wolf. I'm a board member of Yad Sarah. I'm in my former life, I was a U.S. Public Health Service officer, and I worked with the government in lots of capacities in the U.S. and overseas, mainly working on women's health, contraceptive development, and HIV/AIDS. So I'm so happy to be moderating this important panel discussion for you all. Let me just say one thing. For those of you who are in the audience or participants, however you want to call it, if you have questions, please put the questions in the chat, and they'll cycle back to me, and I'll be able to field the questions to the appropriate person. So let's get underway if everybody's ready. I think I would like to just start off by maybe having individuals talk about their programs and how they help men, women, and children from homes that have domestic violence, and maybe talk a little bit about how treating men is different from treating women. So why don't we start with Shlomit, if you don't mind.
Okay, I don't mind, thank you.
Okay.
So I'll say a few words about what we're doing in our center by treating the problem of domestic violence. You said we are treating men, women, and children. We are treating the aggressor, the victim, and the child who is exposed to violence between the parents. So we give an individual therapy, a couple therapy, and a lot of group therapy. Actually, every week we have something around 10 group therapy. Like this week we had already 9. And we have the basic groups, which means for the women, we have empowering and supportive group. For the men, we have control anger groups. We have 12 steps groups. You probably heard about 12 steps. It helps the addicted patients, and we made the adaptation to these groups to domestic violence, and other places over our country took the way of treating for their groups in the center of treating domestic violence. We have parenting groups, which means parenting in shadow of violence for mothers and for fathers. We have phototherapy groups. Yesterday we had a phototherapy group for men. Sometimes we have art therapy groups, community group, communication groups. So all kind of group work. The main tool for all of the patients, I would say, is empowering them. And what we do is to open new options, because most of our clients, I think, do not know that there is another way of living. They think that the way they live with their suffer is the way that all of the other people around them do live. And we try to open them new options, to teach them a new language with no power, with no control, language with no fear and no feeling of blame and shame. We try to that they'll understand that there is a way to change their life, and they have to take responsibility to their life. And we see that we do succeed. I think that the main difference between treating the violator, the aggressor, and the victim is that when we're talking about the aggressor, the first step that we want to do is to stop the violence. And how do we do it? We try to help them to identify the signs, the physical, the emotional, the cognitive signs, which they know when they feel them, then they'll be aggressive. Like this week I met a man, and he said, when we try to identify the signs, he said he feels his ears getting warm. Or another man said his heart is running away. So these are signs that they are physical signs that they're going to be violent. So we try to help them to identify, and then to identifying the ways that they can calm down. So that's a tool of, it's a cognitive behavioristic way of treatment. And that's what we do. We start with the men, with the aggressors, with the victims. And then after then, we can go to the roots of the problem, the emotional part with them. With the women, what we do is to start, we start with the dynamic way, talking about their emotionals, how to help them to deal with the self-esteem, how to help them to understand that they don't deserve this way of life, that they don't have to live in a fear. They don't have to feel guilt about what they are doing. They don't have to please everybody in their family. And that's a way of dealing with the roots of the problems, and in an emotional way. So this, if I can identify, this is the different two ways which we deal with the aggressors, and how we deal to begin with the victims.
Okay, before I go to Shari, let me just ask Mani, do you have anything to add? Although I think Shlomit covered it pretty well, but do you have anything to add?
I think that Shlomit really covered very well the idea of our center. And we can see, as Shlomit said, a lot of success working with all men, women, and with the groups as well. Because the same principles are also implemented in the groups, which is very powerful.
Okay, thanks. Shari, how about in the US? What do you guys do?
Hi, thank you so much again for having me today. So I had recently stepped down after 10 years as the clinical director of a big domestic violence program affiliated with Jewish Family Service of Metro West here in New Jersey. And what I can say as to what we have seen and what we know just statewide and in other parts of the country as well is, first of all, when we're dealing with abusive situations, one of the things that often happens is that the couple comes in to seek marriage counseling. So that's one of the things that we try to immediately separate. If there's any abuse, any violence, any issues of power and control, which is what domestic violence is the basis of, we want to see them separately. We don't want to work together as a couple because that is, in our experience, not the most effective way to go. So we will send the women to, like Shlomit was saying too, we also believe very heavily in group support. A lot of the victims and the clients have been isolated due to the abuse. So by bringing them together in psychoeducational support group, it allows for them to not only receive information and to process their experiences, but to gain support from each other and really connect and really form bonds that are very powerful and helpful to their healing. For the men's too, there's a lot of different men's group philosophies and curriculum out there in the States. So people have different beliefs on, oh, this is the most effective program. There's Emerge, there's, the original one from Duluth, Minnesota, that was first created. So there's all kinds of different, New York has their own, there's a New York project that has a curriculum. So there's different ways. And I guess it depends a little bit also if you're working with a population of men who are, coming, voluntarily, or is there a court order involved, or, you're dealing with a different level of investment. We find that court-ordered people, whether it be victims, perpetrators, are more resistant and are more angry and feel that the system is forcing them to do something. So that's a whole different level too, where we need to get their buy-in and we need to join with them and realize that we are not part of the system that's looking to re-injure or continue hurting them, but that we are looking to assist and to improve and to help them. We also, with children too, we work with the children, we do groups, we had individual counseling, and also we work with both parents, whether perpetrator or victim, that really you're still dealing with parents. And so it's helpful to be able to work with both parties, to best serve the interests of the children. I do also want to add that, something with men that's difficult is that we have most of the clients that we work with, the victims, are women. It's harder to get men to voluntarily come forward. There's a lot of shame that's associated with it, a lot of denial, a lot of other issues that need to be acknowledged and unpacked. And even when we get asked about doing programs for men, like I can't often get a group of men together to do a men's group. I may have one here, one there, but to really get a group is very difficult. So it's a population that can be hard to bring together voluntarily to work with.
Shari, are you
something?
talking about, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Can I
Call me.
say, it's
Go.
very interesting because what you describe about your work is very similar to what's happening here. But in our center, which is very unique, also here in Israel, half of our clients, the men, are coming voluntarily.
That's amazing.
And also the other half, I would say, if we're talking about numbers, that we have, I think it's between third to half of, if every 100 women, we have 30 to 50 men who are coming, which is a very high percentage of men who are coming to be treated, and half of them are coming voluntarily. Even more, 55% is coming voluntarily. 30% are referring through the welfare services, and only 10% are coming through the probation services, which is very unique. And we have every week at least 3 or 4 groups of men. So
Can I ask you one question about that? I'm just curious. I think part of the challenge we have here in the States is that there's a very strong link between perpetration of domestic violence and the criminalization of that act. So I want, and if you decriminalized it somehow and focused more on the mental health aspect as opposed to the, punitive aspect, I wonder if that would change it. And I wonder if that's what you're seeing partially. I don't know.
Maybe Mani, you'll answer because you see the
Yeah.
men.
Yeah, I think that the referrals, a lot of referrals, people come either through friends or family or somebody you heard, through rabbis who refer them, and not through, without having the criminalization, because it's not about them being, doing something against the law. It's just that they or the spouses or the family members feel that there is a problem, or somebody recommends it. Sometimes it's the welfare, but even though it's not necessarily going through police or something like that. And not only that, I think they understand that coming to therapy is the way to stop it before they will get into trouble with the authorities. Is that answering the question? I'm not sure, but
Yeah, thank you.
Let me jump in here. I have two questions. First of all, I just want to reiterate that the folks who are participating in the webinar, not the panelists, please feel free to ask questions and put them in the chat if you have them. Secondly, I just wanted to, I guess we're on the Israeli folks now. Anybody, can you jump in and give us an idea about what the prevalence of domestic violence is? And I also want to come back to Shari afterwards and find out what the situation is in the US. So Shlomit or Mani, do you have a sense for the frequency of this or the prevalence?
Yes, I can tell. I have the statistics. You know, we are talking about a hidden problem. So we all know that the statistics are only approximately, but what we say here is that every 6 to 7 women suffers from domestic violence, which means they're talking about 150,000 women of suffering from domestic violence in Israel, which I have to admit that I know the statistic for something around 20 years, so I don't think it's so that you can count it. What I can say is that in the last year of the Quran, they discovered that the refers to the hotlines got larger in 10%, and the refers to the services of treating domestic violence went up in 14%, which is not so, which is good. In our center, we saw in the last year something around 210 women and 130 men and few kids. I have to admit that it's less than it was before the quarantine. It was hard, although there were more refers, it was harder to people to come to be treated because of the situation, of the isolation, of the children were at home, and children we hardly saw in the last 1.5 years, which we saw much more in the years before. So if this is the answer.
Shari, how about stateside? What are you experiencing?
So we were also, the statistic in the States is 1 out of every 4 women, will be a victim of domestic violence. It's a much lower percentage for men. I don't have the men one offhand. It's also, I think with men, it's much more underreported. I mean, I think both are underreported, but with men for sure underreported, that they don't reach out and again, seek that same kind of help that maybe, due to shame, due to embarrassment. Like Shlomit was saying, we also had a very, interesting sort of roller coaster with the pandemic. We initially, when the pandemic started, and everybody was told to isolate at home for safety, that wasn't safe for our clients, for our population. Being forced to be at home under, strenuous conditions was not helpful. So one of the things that we were seeing is that clients were not reaching out. All of the hotlines, and again, I can speak with confidence in New Jersey with the state organization I'm involved with, the hotlines were silent. And we were all very concerned, but we understood that victims were unable to reach out for help because the perpetrator was always there. And yet, interestingly enough, 911 calls, which in the States is the emergency number you call when you need help. So the 911 calls went skyrocketing, but the police would come out, but nothing could happen because, again, where was she going to go? Where was he going to go? We found that victims were very afraid to go to shelter because they were afraid of contracting COVID. They were, they felt perpetrators were hiding masks and hiding, sanitizers. So, victims couldn't leave the house. They were threatening to expose the children or expose them. All these new tactics that came out, due to the pandemic. And I still think the numbers are a lot less. We also, as we moved to telehealth, we became much more flexible as therapists and as mental health supporters. I mean, I had clients were in their bathrooms, in their cars, in their laundry rooms. I had a client who would go do her laundry and be on telehealth with me at the same time in order to receive services. So, as now with Omicron and now people are afraid again, it's been waves of people looking for help, needing help, but it's been a very big challenge.
Do you think that the domestic violence situation has increased during COVID? I'm not talking about ability to reach out for help, but just has there been more violence because people are kind of confined and stuck together at home?
Absolutely, along with a lot more pressure economically, as economics for people, were changed. People lost their jobs. People, big stressors increased. The kids were at home trying to learn, on Zoom school or telehealth, whatever you like using. So everybody was in the house all of the time. There were a lot of pressures. I think that, and so I think that there were a lot less options for victims to be able, I had a client who had left an abusive situation, was staying with friends, and the friend said, with this whole, this is the very beginning of COVID, you can't stay here anymore. We need you to leave because we need to shelter in place and we can't have you here. So it really became very complicated, I think, for, people to be able to leave and to be able to have breaks from each other, and to be safe.
How about Shlomit and Mani? What was the situation in Israel? Did COVID make it worse, so to speak?
So I would say that when it began, which is almost 2 years ago, it was very challenging because from one day to another, it took us a few days. We transferred the whole work and made it online. And the group works and the individual works really in a few days. And it was something which we had to learn, because if you would ask me a week before that we will do a treatment online, I would say, what are you talking about? So it's not only that the clients had to learn how to be treated online, we had to learn it too. And it was really from one day to another. It was much more challenging in our clients because, as you know, we are addressed to the ultra-Orthodox community here also, and they don't have smartphones. Sometimes they don't have a computer at home, or maybe one, and they have a very small apartments, and most of the time, the children are away. They are in the yeshivot and the girls are in seminars, and also from one day to another, all the kids were sending back home, which they are not used to it. Maybe they're used to it in Sukkot or Pesach, not in everyday life. And they don't have backyards and porches. It's really very, very tense way of living. And then in these conditions, we had to try to give them therapy online. So we had to be very flexible. Also, our workers had sometimes to make appointments at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the night.
Nice.
When they could go to the yard downstairs, which they are not surrounded by their children and with the husbands or the wife. And also we had a project of buying and giving them computers, because to help them with the children, that the children can learn online and then they can be treated online. So we really, but I have to admit that it took few months and we came back to frontalic work, I think in May already, in June for sure, year ago. We were working face to face. And as we do now, we got used to the situation and we're still most of the time face to face with a distance, with a long distance, with masks, with open windows. And I always say that when we began the distance to work with a distance, I said I have to bring my glasses in order to see the patient. And now I don't know what will be in the next day when Be'ezrat Hashem will be again in normal times. How could I sit so near to the patients because we're used to it to be far away. So. But of course, it's hard because here I think this week because we have again we have the new variant and many of the people are not coming. So it's also we have interruptions in the meetings. It's not easy, but we are dealing very good with it. What I want to mention that in the beginning. We were so happy because we saw that those clients who were treating before, they learned how to use the tools that they got in the therapy, and they really used it when they were closed and they couldn't come to therapy. And we saw the fruits of the therapy, and it made us very happy.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
What I can say that the symptoms are raising, because it of the problems are becoming in high level, go up in a higher level, but the language is the same.
Okay, I have a question that came from one of the participants, I believe. In the US, when the perpetrator, for lack of a better word, of domestic violence is arrested, the kids are maybe sent to foster care or elsewhere. What happens in Israel when that's the case? Is it the same thing? Are kids sent to foster care or somewhere to social services?
You mean that both parents? I mean, if one parent is being arrested, then the kids stay with the other parent, and sometimes if the mother goes to the shelter, then if the children are young, then she can go to the shelter with the children. So you're talking about the situation that both parents are arrested?
Well, let me just read you the question. In the US, when the police are called and the perpetrator is arrested, the children are often placed in foster care because the fact that they've witnessed domestic violence is considered child abuse. Is this true in Israel as well? That's the question.
If there's one parent that could stay with the child and get support, get therapy, we have a lot of parenting counseling as well, then the children stay with the parent and they get the support while growing up with the one parent.
So most of the time, no, but most of the time, I can't think of the situation that both parents were arrested. I really, in all of the years which I'm working, and it's very rare that you take children out of the house. It should be a real dangerous for them emotionally or physically. So
okay, I got the impression that the situation was that the children witnessed the abuse and therefore do they remain in the home?
So can I jump in for a minute? Because I don't know what state that the person who posted the question is from, but I can talk about in New Jersey, in New York, that's not how it really happens. First of all, there's been a lot of work to educate child protective service workers to have them understand. It used to be that basically if there was domestic violence in the home, traditionally the mother would get blamed or the victim would get blamed. They would want to remove the children. Why aren't you keeping your kids safe? But there's been a lot of work in education with protective service workers to help them understand the dynamics of domestic violence, the dynamics of abuse. I know I've been involved with some of the trainings for these workers. I also think that just because somebody gets arrested, oftentimes they get arrested in their home that night, and then they'll get probation or something like that. It's not like they're going to go to prison for long periods of time and that the kids are going to be left on their own. And the third thing is, again, in New Jersey, unfortunately, domestic violence is not a criteria for not having visitation and or custody. In fact, we know many cases where the perpetrator has done some serious crime. I had a case really quickly back when I was working in Maryland, when I started my career. I had a perpetrator who tried to attempted murder, kill his partner, stabbed her 27 times. She was in the ICU for a month, really bad. And then, but from prison, he petitioned to have visitation with his 8-year-old son. So the victim's mother, because the victim was too traumatized, the victim's mother had to bring her 8-year-old grandson every other Sunday to a maximum security prison so he could have visitation with the man who tried to kill her daughter, his father. So there's a lot of work, at least in this area, that, there's a lot of work for like rights of the parent, and that the domestic violence in the courts is still seen as not something that affects the kids, and that visitation and or custody should not be impacted because of domestic violence. And it's the opposite. I really sometimes wish it would, because I think it is harmful to the children, and they have no ability to say, I don't want to see this person because I don't feel safe. Children don't have those rights. It's the best interest of the children that the language states.
Okay,
No,
let me just,
here
I was just going to tell you what someone in the audience responded, that in California, the kids are reported to the child abuse agency, and if there's domestic violence in the home, and then if the mother refuses to leave the perpetrator, the kids might be removed from the household. But if not, that's not the case, that she's, quote, protecting the kids. That's the answer I got from the audience. So I don't know if you want to react to that at all.
I was going to say that I'm not familiar with how things work in California, truthfully, and it couldn't be. It's very independent, state by state. States make their own choices
state
and
by state
decisions.
Okay.
So I can say, like, again, in New York, in New Jersey, in this, the East Coast area, Northeast, like, that's not how it works, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah.
And I have to say that here we have special social workers who have to be in touch with the children. And if a child refuses to see or is afraid to meet the father, for instance, they are listening. They would look whether it's because of the mother told him that he shouldn't see the parent. Then they won't listen, but they are trying to listen also to the voice of the children. And sometimes there are special places which, if there is any way of danger to the children, that they can meet the father or the mother only in a safe place, with which social workers are looking at them through the meeting.
Okay, I have a couple more questions from the audience, if you don't mind. One of them is, if you suspect that someone is being abused, okay, what can you say to them to encourage them to seek help, to seek treatment, whatever? Any thoughts on that, or any response?
Yeah,
Jump in.
Sure. I think, first of all, is that every survivor is on their own journey and on their own path. And we may see something and say, oh my gosh, that's horrible. You've got to get out of that relationship right now. But we need to let that person sort of make their decisions. I think that the important things are sort of they start with B, to be patient, let the person do things as they want to do them, be present, supportive, but again, like letting them lead the way and make their own decisions. Be aware, know the resources, be able to help, somebody who you suspect is in trouble, make sure you know what the local resources are for them, that you can help refer them, and believe them. That's the biggest one of all, because you may be the first person that they're ever saying something to if they say something to you about it. And your response may really help direct the future of the way that their treatment goes. You know, if they say to you, they tell you that they're being abused and you say, really? But your partner is such a nice person. I can't believe they would do that to you. Then that really may reinforce that, oh, look, it's my fault, I'm causing it. But if you really say that's not okay, and there are places to get help, and let me support you as you're ready, that's a very different message you're giving.
How about Manny? Any thoughts on the subject?
Right. No, I agree. I mean, we will never tell a person what to do, but we'll help them to be aware and understand the situation, to see what are the consequences on them and their children. This is a little bit linked to the previous question, because obviously, even if a person will say, I don't care, I mean, I'm fine, I'm willing to stay in that situation, we always have to remind them that they have children and they have responsibility to their children. We try to open the options, the different options they have, and to make clear what are the options and the consequences, and help them make the best decision for them, because they're the only people, they are the people, they have to live with their decisions. So if we take the decision for them, then they will not be able to live with it. So we have to help them to find out what is the best for them.
Okay.
To live with their
What
decision.
I can add I want to add that what we are doing to prevent is we are doing work in the community. We are going to high schools to work with the teachers and with the children or the youngster there, in order to describe them what is domestic violence problem, in order to give them what we call the red lights, that they can identify the signs. And also we are coming there in order that they will see the workers, and they know that there are services. And I always feel when they see that they see the social worker, and they see that we are nice people, and somebody who they can get along with and talk to, it helps them to refer. So we are doing a lot of community work with schools. And we also are doing community works with rabbis and with the teachers of the grooms and brides, you know, those who they are with them before of the wedding. So we are trying to help them to understand what are the signs, what are all kinds of the problem that domestic violence is not only physical, it can be emotional and sociable and so on. And to give them all the signs, like nobody should, you don't have to be afraid in relationship, in couple relationship. Nobody can control you if somebody limits you. All the list of signs of the signs of what we call, as I said, red lights. And also we tell the teachers and in other places that if you were raised in a house that the parents were that there was domestic violence, you are in a risk group. If you are dating a fellow or a girl which she was exposed to domestic violence in her house, this is a risk group, and you have to look very, very carefully what is her language, what is his language.
Okay, look, can I ask you, this also came from the audience, what specific types of treatment you have for the kids who were in these kinds of situations? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Can I just say one thing?
Shari?
To add on to what Shlomit was saying, I agree. That prevention and education is key to
Something
really.
happened to Shari's voice.
Shari, something's wrong with your audio.
Oh. Now.
Uh-oh. maybe you could turn your audio off and then on again or something. I don't know what to recommend.
What about now?
No.
Okay, we'll continue on.
All right,
Maybe she can go out and come in again.
come back in. Yeah. In the meantime, how about our Israeli friends? Can you answer specifically what, what programs you have for kids or what you do to treat kids who are in these domestic violence situations?
Yes, I can say that these children, most of the time, they really don't know that there is other way of living. They think all the children's are going through the same experience they have. And what we see that these children do not have the safe place, the emotional safe place inside of them, which we get our safe place in our houses from our parents, and they get from their parents a very unsecure place. And also most of those children, the outside, the world is not a safe place for them. They feel and they think that the world is a very dangerous place. And also the language that they know is the language of power and control. So what we do in the treatment room with the children, we are teaching them the new language that they can achieve things with no fear and with no control and not with power, and trying to make for them a safe place inside and outside, that they'll feel that they experience in the room of the treatment by the relationship with the therapist. They'll build a safety place that they know that it's not dangerous outside there. And we're doing it through playing with them, and it's mainly by playing with them that they, if they're doing something wrong, they're not punished immediately, that we receive them as they are, whatever
Okay.
their behavior will be. And I think mainly these are the main things.
Okay, thanks. You want to try again, Shari?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yay, wonderful, thank you. Just so two things. First of all, I agree with Shlomit about prevention and education being key. And that we also, there's an organization in New Jersey, Project Sarah, which works with the Orthodox Jewish community based out of Jewish Family Service in Passaic and Clifton. And there's a lot of work that's being done to educate rabbis and their wives, and also the teachers of brides and grooms, as well as the people who work on wigs. There's a national program with hairdressers. It's not a non-denominational program called Cut It Out, where there's a curriculum to teach people who cut hair and do hair how to help victims. So we've done that with wig makers, so taken that to a Jewish level. So yes, I think that's a very big piece, is that if people know the resources and people understand what domestic violence is, that's an important thing to help once something happens or when something starts. And just quickly, as far as children are concerned, we do a lot of play therapy, right? Because play is the language of children. So, where we can sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with children, we have playrooms and artwork and ways for them to express themselves in that manner that's comfortable for them, as well as groups that are educational, that teach about, like proper, ways to express yourself and managing anger and conflict, and expressing feelings and these types of, things that are not sometimes taught at home, when there's abuse.
What about?
We had also, maybe I'll mention that we had also, for children, we had group of therapy with animals, which was a very, very impressive tool to work with the children.
And we also had groups for mothers and children together, which was
Right.
very powerful as well.
Right.
I have a question that also came from the audience. What about self-referral when it's not a physical violence type situation where it's more of a verbal abuse or that kind of thing. Do you have a lot of self-referrals for that category of violence?
Are you talking about victims? Are you talking about gender, men? Are you who are we talking about for self-referring?
Oh, I don't know. It's from the audience. I don't really know specifically, but the point is, trying to distinguish between the physical violence and
Yes,
verbal abuse and so forth.
so the answer is yes. Yes, we have all kinds of violence in which
Right.
people are maybe.
No,
Mani,
regarding self-referrals, I think we have self-referrals from all kinds, also physical violence and also non-physical violence. We have self-referrals also from the perpetrators, and also couples who a lot of times the abuse and the violence is mutual, which I have found a lot of times. Couples who come, sometimes one of the sides, a lot of times the wife would come as a self-referral because she thinks that she needs to educate her husband, and during therapy comes up that there's some kind of mutual violence as well.
maybe Mani will describe some of the work with men who are the victims, because that's something which is not so common to hear about.
I just wanted, before you do that, I just want to jump in and say, for us, self-referrals are a lot more with the victim. And in terms of not when it's necessarily a physical incident, but when there's an incident. So there'll be an explosion, there'll be a huge verbal fight, there'll be something, financial, something big will happen, and then there'll be the self-referral that the victim will often try to get some help. We don't see as much self-referral with perpetrators. Often when they do self-refer, it's because the victim has said, if you don't call and do something, then I'm leaving, and they get scared. So then they'll try to refer. But Mani, if you want to give some examples, that's great.
No, I agree with that a lot of the referrals from the perpetrators is also if the victim has put some kind of limit, sometimes thanks to the victim being already in therapy or getting some kind of support. But we have also people who just realize that they've shocked with themselves, or by the way, you asked about children before. I think that a lot of the perpetrators have been children growing up as victims of violence. So at some point when they realize that they are copying their parents' behavior, then sometimes they also come to therapy. Now,
Shlomit, here's a question directly for you. Someone who's in the audience said they heard about a special project about graffiti against violence. So maybe in public spaces. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about what we talked about yesterday.
Okay. You want to share the picture, or I'll. What we had an idea. It was just before the quarantine that we had an art therapy group for men, and actually what we did was a graffiti group for the men, and they are working. They were men who were aggressors, and it was a process that they'll go to the public, to a center place in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, which was in the parking lot of the market, and build a wall who caused to that you see the wall here, that the change is in our hands. Men who are rebuilding from violence. And what they did was, it was a long process. One of the members of the group was a photographer, a professional photographer. So they decided that they'll photo everybody's hand of the members of the group, and from the photo of the hand, they'll make a stop sign that one have to stop the violence. And they worked with their background stories, and they worked with the then they became with a slogan. Everyone became with a slogan which represent his background. So you see the slogans, they're in Hebrew. So I said, I'll try to translate like not violent, be proud, or violence, move backwards, or not
Denying, not
deny, go to treatment, and so on and so forth. You are violent, you are lonely, or violence equals prison, and so on and so forth. And it was a it was an amazing work, and it stayed for over a year in a very central place in Yerushalayim, and people really referred to the center because of the fact that they saw this this wall. So it helped the clients with their process of doing something different with their life, and it also prevent at the street, because it brought people to think about the problem and to refer to be helped in the center. It was very, very interesting, because when we began the group, we said, you know, all the participants will work together, but then everybody will decide whether he is going to go outside and represent his sentence outside, or he doesn't want to participate in this stage of the process. Most of them represent their hand outside. Many of them came to when we exposed the wall, and some of them were talking about their problem and the process that they went through. And few of them brought their families to when we exposed the wall. So we saw all kinds of the people in the process, and it was very, very, very interesting. What we are trying now to do with this wall, we are copying the wall. It was there as the idea of the members of the group, the clients. We go with this wall, we copy it, and we go to prisons where people are there because of what they did in domestic violence. And now in current time, we can't go in to make a conversation with them. But actually what we intend to do, that the prisoners are going to be, they'll have the original wall, and they'll build an answer with another wall, and this will be the treatment with the prisoners. So that's just one example to our group work with men.
Thanks. I have another question. I have a question from the audience concerning what to do when when the abuser or perpetrator, whatever you want to call, uses religion as kind of the language to get what he or she wants. So the example that the person in the audience gave was, for example, the use of diapers on Shabbat if the things are not already whatever. Let me see if I can find the question.
So we have a lot of examples. Since we are working a lot with the ultra-Orthodox community, we have a lot of examples of using religion, which is another kind of violence. When we talk about, when we give a list of different kinds of violence, like we have physical and financial and emotional and sexual, we also have, we call it the spiritual violence, which is using religion and violence against, like telling the person your prayers will not be accepted anyway, or taking, or I once had a story of a couple that the woman really wanted the husband to prepare on Friday the Shabbat candles, because this is a sign of Shalom Bayit, of having peace in the home. And the husband said, "You never clean enough. If you clean the home well enough, I will prepare the candles." And the woman was cleaning the whole week the house. And the husband came Friday afternoon and was doing like a search in the house. And at the end, he found a little tissue under the couch, I think. And he said, "I'm not preparing the candles." So this is when it was a very big crisis for the wife. So this is spiritual violence, which we have been discussing a lot. There have been papers in Israel published about it. And we treat it with the same way like any kind of violence. With understand, first of all, being aware, as Shlomit said at the beginning, the most important thing when we start treating violence is to be aware that this is violence, that the way I'm behaving is wrong, and get tools how to deal with it. And again, it's based on anger, so anger management, understanding what the distress is and what are my emotional issues that cause me to become angry and feel helpless and lose control and so on. So at the end of the day, it is a unique kind of violence, but it is violence, so we treat it like any other kind of domestic violence.
What about, oh, sorry. I was just
No,
gonna
I
ask
just,
a question.
Shlomit, before, sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, go. Go
The
ahead.
question is if you want me to say something about the men as victims, which we have in Yad Sarah group. I have been treating a lot of men as victims. So is that okay if I say a few words about that?
Sure.
Sure.
Go
So you know, it's not so spoken about, but we have been seeing recently, in the last few years, more and more men who are also victims. Sometimes they come as self-referrals. Sometimes it's during a couple therapy. And sometimes the men are being referred by their wives, and then it comes out. But we have had very severe situations about with violence, not as physical, definitely not physical in the way of injuries and so on. But we have had a lot of stories of dehumanization, talking very badly in front of the children, kicking out of the house, locking out of the home. I mentioned the clinic before. I had a man who, if he would not clean, this is the opposite story, if he would not clean the whole house on time before Shabbat, and he was working Fridays, he would not get food on Shabbat besides a piece of challah. We had stories of a lot of using the children against the father. We also had financial cases that the woman would block the husband from any kind of access to money, using trying to talk badly about him in front of the school or of the children and others. And I think that if Shari has spoken before about the men in general not feeling so confident coming to therapy, when the men are the victim, they feel very humiliated, and it's very hard for them to admit in therapy even that they are the victims. And thank God, when we are able to do the process, it's a very, very meaningful process. When the empowerment, realizing that they are victims and that they need help, and that it's and at the end of the process, we see men who become much more. The self-esteem grows in front of themselves, in front of the children, of their wife, and also sometimes we see that they find jobs, that the position jobs, they become much better people for society as well.
Okay, let me jump in here.
I want to add two things to the previous questions about the
Okay.
religion. I want to say that we have a rabbinic committee next to inside of our center, which under the condition that the rabbis are not interrupting interfering in the professional work. And of course, we as professionals are not getting into the halachic questions. But sometimes we get help from them, you know. And if you mentioned the problem of somebody who is abusing through the halachic things, sometimes through the therapy, we refer them to their rabbis, and we're talking with our rabbis in the committee, which are very high level of rabbis, to talk to the rabbi of the patient in order to help him to understand that it's not appropriate, even halachically, to do what he's doing. It's not then when after the rabbi is helping him, then it make us the way to talk with this client about the real problem, which is the domestic violence. So we share sometimes the work with the rabbis. We are also helped with the rabbis by they refer people, because you know these the community, these people are when they feel any pain, they go to the rabbi to begin with. So we have the connection with the rabbis that they refer them to the therapist, and they say that the right place to go. Sometimes we help in halachic therapeutic question, like somebody come to a group work and say that he can't take part in the group because of lashon hara. So we help them by going to the rabbis, and that the rabbis will explain them that it's okay, that it's not lashon hara what we are doing in the group work, and now we can start to work with the resistance to the therapy. So we work with the rabbis about these kinds of problems. I also want to share that sometimes you were talking about the violence that they're doing through the halachic and religious things. Sometimes we also use the religious language in the therapy. Like I can remember a group work with women that when we ask the women to tell about the significant things that they got through the group work, I remember one of the women said that she was, when she came to the group, she was very angry woman, and the point of her view was that it's not something that she can control. God sends her, make her to be angry, so it's not in her responsibility. So she said that what was a turning point was that a friend in the group told her there is a phrase that the one who is angry, to be angry is like to working to adults. So, and she didn't want to make avodah zarah, so that make this religious verse made a turning point in her life. And then what helped her was that through the work in the group, every time she came home, in front of the door, before she got in, she also always made a prayer which we do every day. Yehiyu leratzon imrei pi v'hagion libi lefanecha, that my words and the thoughts of my heart will be to the will of God. And that helped her through the verse of the praying. She took responsibility of her anger in order to be different when she goes into her family. So that's a way to show you how we take the religious language in order to help the people, those people who believe in this verse,
Mhm.
how to be helped by the religious language.
I have one more sense about that, not only the rabbi's committee, but which is very important to us. Sometimes when clients tell me that what I'm telling them is against, or it's wrong, or it's against religion, I always tell them, go and ask your rabbi. And thank God, most of the times the rabbis say that you should listen to what the therapist says. So it's also a tool that we could use.
And I just want to say too, we also focus on mikveh attendance, and that there's a lot that has to do with the mikveh in terms of, domestic violence and so making mikveh attendants aware of the issues and having them know who to call and refer to which rabbis and how to handle it is important.
We had a question about whether any of you have a list of resources that you can perhaps post in the chat or someplace so that those who are seeking this kind of treatment will have a place to go to. Can we do that?
In Israel,
Shari? Both sides. I mean,
Resources.
somebody was just asking if there is a list of resources, if somebody is seeking this kind of a treatment,
So
how do they
there
get
is-
started?
So,
Sure.
it's hard. Obviously, it's a big country in the United
Yeah.
States. So, but there's an organization called the Shalom Task Force that's based out of New York, which is a clearinghouse for domestic violence and religious issues. I'm going to put their number in the chat. And this way, if you have issues anywhere in the country, they can give you the appropriate resources.
That would be great. Thanks a lot, Shari.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's something parallel or similar in Israel, but that would be really good if you could do the same.
yes, there is. In Israel, there are over 100 centers of treatment for the domestic violence. And we are one of the largest, and we have also a center in the Negev, in Sderot, and we have part in the center of Mate Binyamin. So, and whoever is seek for help can refer to our center, and I'll put, Mani, אתה יודע לשים את ה... I put the number in the chat.
של המרכז שלנו?
כן?
Thanks. Thank you. I think we only have this hour to work with, so I think we're going to have to come to a close. Is that right? I think we just have an hour. So I want to thank everybody who's participated. I want to thank the panelists. Thank you very much for engaging in this discussion. I also want to apologize. I know there are questions that came from the audience that we just didn't get to because we didn't have time. So
Maybe
apologies.
Pamela, what I want to say is that one should know that there is a lot to do about domestic violence, and we want to say that nobody, if you are suspicious about domestic violence, don't stay alone with the feelings and with the suspicions. Refer, ask, and there is a lot to do. And now, after so many years of working with domestic violence, we know that there is a lot to do. If you are ready to admit that there is a problem and you want to work on it. So I think one should give this hope to everybody who listens.
Thanks. That's good.
I put my name and contact information in the chat. I don't know if Shlomit
Thank
might
you.
do the same.
Thank you.
And if anybody has questions that I can answer, after we're done, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, again, thank everybody for participating. I'd like to thank I think we had over 30 participants, so that's a good sign. Keep your eyes peeled because we continue to have these webinars on various topics of interest. We usually notify by email and also by social media. And now I'll put in the big pitch. If anybody wants to donate to Yad Sarah, go for it. I think I don't have the address right now to put in the chat, but it's pretty easy to find on the web. So,
But especially to the family center.
well, right. Okay. the Family Center, Friends of Yad Sarah in the United States. I think actually, I think it was Adele or somebody just put the link, the donation link into the chat. So grab it and donate, and we really appreciate all the help we can get. That's great. Anybody else want to stick their 2 cents in?